Good afternoon, Facebook audience. I'm here with Bryan, who is the owner of Osprey CPA Services. I think we're all a little bit busy today. It's kind of been a nutty day for me. I don't know about you, Bryan. How's it going, Bryan?
It's going really well, thank you. Yeah, we're just gearing up for our next year's tax season and trying to get some back of the house stuff figured out and get some tax planning done for some clients. So yeah, it's good. Getting ready for the holidays.
And you're back from your surgery.
I am. I'm about 4 weeks post-surgery, so yeah, things are going well, healing up nicely. So
Good.
I'm being a bad boy and not wearing my sling while I'm sitting down, but
I know. I was going to say, are you still in pain?
not so much. Doing okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
just great group of doctors, and just lucky. Good situation.
Yes. I've been there before, where I'm very appreciative of our healthcare system when something goes wrong or you have surgery.
Absolutely.
So, Bryan, today we were going to talk about the difference between an LLC Corp and an S Corp and what the tax advantages are. And I think to level set, let's even break down the acronym. So, Limited Liability Corporation.
Company, actually, yeah.
Limited Liability Company. And then what does S Corp stand for?
It's a sub S. ES is a designation from the IRS that is, it's just a chapter, a subchapter S corporation, they call it. So it's just a different way that they treat corporation. So
okay, so we're not sure
what
actually.
It's just it's the section of the code, the IRS code, essentially that they designated. So yeah, there's different types of organizations. There's the LLC, like you mentioned, the corporation, which can be treated as a regular corporation or a C Corp, they call it, or an S Corp. And then there's like limited partnerships, there's limited liability partnerships, and then sole proprietorships. Those are kind of the different entities that we work with, or that we've seen. So yeah.
So sole proprietor, which is typically an individual running a company. I know that's what I was for a long time with contractors. And then a limited liability company. What is a limited liability company?
It's a separate entity, so it offers, and I'm no attorney by any means, but it offers additional protections for you from liability outside of. So if you're a sole proprietorship, the state or any legal, it's not a separate legal entity from yourself. So everything's reported under your social security number generally, and so unfortunately, if something goes wrong with the business, they could potentially go after personal assets and things like that. But again, I'm not an attorney. But
okay. So what is the advantage of forming an LLC over a sole proprietorship?
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest things to me, and from a tax perspective especially, is it just gives you more flexibility, more opportunities to reduce self-employment tax is the biggest thing. And then as an LLC, you actually get the decision. You can actually you have the option of being taxed as an LLC, or a partnership, or being taxed as a corporation. So it's, like I said, it's a lot more flexible than other structures. So yeah.
So that seems to be the. So you're taxed differently, but your liability does not change from sole proprietor to LLC.
Well, liability, so legal liability, it offers you more protection from legal liabilities. So if something happens with your company, they can't go after your personal assets. Then with a sole proprietorship, it could be then that could be the case with the sole proprietorship. So
But I thought you just said that. I thought you just said that LLC does not protect you from.
Oh, did I misspoke? I'm sorry if I said it backwards. I must have added a not in there for some reason. But no, LLC gives you more protection than a sole proprietorship would. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So then, what would be the reason to be an S Corp?
So as an S Corp, so that's
what is an S Corp? What is it?
It's a separate entity, just like an LLC would be, but as a corporation, it's, from a tax perspective, a regular corporation is actually taxed as a separate entity, whereas an LLC and an S Corp are what's called pass-through entities. And so what happens is they generally report all their income and expenses and everything like a normal company would, But then all the earnings at the bottom, the net income is passed along to the partners based on whatever percentage ownership of the members of the LLC have. So if it's a 50-50 partnership with you and I, then and our net income was $40,000, then each of us would report $20,000 on our individual tax returns. So that's where the tax is actually paid. It's paid at the member level. So on a corporation, though, a regular corporation, a C corporation, the entity itself pays tax on that net income, and then the shareholders are actually taxed again on dividends. So that's, I mean, it's fairly rare that we see a lot of C corporations on the small business side at least. Our general recommended structure is an LLC that is elects to be taxed as an S corporation. So, so I can expand on that a little bit. That's probably
that is just like plain as mud to me over here.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
just to give some context, so many people are sole proprietors as freelancers. They're individuals, and if they hire people, they hire subcontractors, and I believe that's your only option. And you're taxed.
Employees, but generally, you're right. I said you can't have employees as a sole proprietor, but like you said, it's generally it's more of that subcontractor approach. So yeah.
And you're taxed with your own social security number.
Right.
An LLC builds in some protection if something happens, because people will take task with the company instead of you as an individual.
Right.
And the taxes for an LLC are different from a sole proprietor, or still based on social security number?
It can be both, actually. So that's a good segue into kind of the differences there. So as an LLC, like I mentioned, you can elect to be taxed as a partnership or a corporation, or an S corporation is how we'll structure it. But the LLC as a partnership, actually, all of the income is treated very, very similarly or even identically to a sole proprietor. So all of that income for that LLC as a partnership is taxed, is subject to self-employment tax. And so that's where the biggest tax savings come around, is in that reduction of self-employment tax. And the IRS created self-employment tax to ensure that self-employed individuals are paying into Social Security and Medicare. So it's just like as an employee, I have Social Security, Medicare withheld from my check, and then my employer would also pay the same percentages into those. So I pay half as an employee, the employer pays half as an employer. So self-employment tax is actually paying both of those. So it's just over 15% or so on that net income. So as a sole proprietor, you're not only paying income tax, you're also paying self-employment tax.
Okay, and that goes away when you become an LLC?
Not completely. So an LLC is an S corp. The IRS expects you to pay yourself what they call reasonable compensation, and so that reasonable compensation is done through payroll. And so there's the Social Security and Medicare are taken out of that payroll and paid. But then anything left over for the net income for the company is only subject to regular ordinary income tax. So what happens is you save about 15% on that leftover amount. So for example, if the company makes $100,000 before your salary, and a reasonable salary for your business is maybe $70,000 or so for what it would cost to hire somebody to do what you do, that remaining $30,000, you would save 15% on that. So that would be about $4,500 or so that you're saving in self-employment tax in that example.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. So what is the typical evolving, if there is a typical evolving? I have spent a large amount of my career while working for corporations, but also working in startup environments. So I've seen these beginning sorts of processes, and I've also run a small company for the last, I don't know, almost 10 years, 12 years. So what's the typical way that it evolves? Do people launch companies as LLCs, or what's typical, or what do you see?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think oftentimes, especially in the past, it was, okay, I'm going to start my business. I'm going to get going and before we had all the access to information that we have today, people would, okay, I'm a sole proprietor. I'm just going to run my business and do what I do. And then as people would continue to grow, it's like, oh, well, then they get some advice along the way or something. Maybe it's good to form that legal entity separate from myself. So they potentially would excuse me, form an LLC, and then again, it kind of evolves to, well, is just a traditional LLC the best tax benefits for me? Is that the best tax situation I can be in? And so from there, it's okay, now we can potentially make an election to be treated as an S Corp or change over to an S Corp or whatever the case may be. But oftentimes now, though, I'm seeing, and it's really a relief that I see this a lot now, are new companies being proactive. And so new business owners are saying, coming to me or coming to a tax professional or a legal professional as well, saying, what's the best structure? How am I going to best protect myself as well as maximize my tax situation and minimize my tax liability? So it's refreshing to me to see that. I've had a few new clients come in recently, the last month or so, saying that look, this is what I want to do. How do I best structure it? So I think the information is available to us a lot more easily now, and so but as a professional, it's really it's important to get that professional advice and to make sure things are structured correctly, because I've seen a lot of horror stories that come back and bite you. It's if you're not set up and going in the right direction early, it can definitely cost you down the road.
So are those decisions mostly made around liability or size of company or number of employees? Do those things affect those decisions? It sounds like I'm most familiar with the liability aspect. What other factors influence the decision to become to be a sole proprietor LLC versus?
Yeah, I would say that liability is probably the front runner, because in our society today, it's if something goes wrong, and which it tends to at times, people tend to come back after that company or whatever the case may be. So protection, that liability protection is probably the first thing, and and rightfully so. I mean, you want to protect the assets that you have, and as well as build assets within a different structure. And that's another aspect of it is building wealth within like that ownership, the business ownership, and having a separate asset, separate separate entity itself. So sorry, my voice is going.
So, and I've also learned that when you have subcontractors, as long as you have proper paperwork in place, that their work for you is covered under your liability insurance, as long as you are employing them correctly. So when a company carries liability insurance, your employees are covered as well.
Yeah, it tends to. Yeah, there are different types of ways to look at it. There's the liability, so the work that they're doing on behalf of your company. Yeah, so that would generally be the case. And that's probably a topic for another day. Is who qualifies as a subcontractor and who's an employee. That's definitely a hot topic within.
It is 1099 versus employee. Well. Yeah, 1099 versus W-2, and I find that on both the employer side and the employee side that people are very confused about that. And the only reason I am familiar with it is because I hired a lot of 1099s in my career, and I had to study those principles and teach the contractor as I hired them those principles, because it's really important to understand the difference and how you can behave in each of the relationships. So where does forming a board come in? So I'm really taking to brass tacks, but I mean, obviously board members are for sharing decisions, but is that included or not included in one of these business types versus the other?
Yeah, generally boards, like board of directors, you see that in corporations more than anything else. And you can have a board of directors, like for instance, my company is a corporation, and I am the only owner and the only board member. So that there is a board there. But when you're talking about LLCs, you have members, and so there's general members of an LLC, and then there's managing members. And so if you have an LLC with 4 or 5 members, generally they'll select 1 or 2 as managing members, and so that's where a lot of the operating decisions are made and things like that, where the they're running the business essentially, and maybe the general members are just investors or something like that that are detached from the business a little bit more so, and then
But they're
like the
not
tax
involved in
matters partner.
profit or money flow.
They
They're just
can
their
be. I mean, it just
advisors.
depends.
Oh,
It depends. Yeah, it just depends on the situation. Yeah, that was just one example. If let's just say I've got a family member who invested into my business, and so
okay.
they wanted to, instead of making a loan, they said, well, how about 10% of the business or something like that? And so they wouldn't necessarily be as involved in the day-to-day decision making, but they would get 10% of the equity and the profits as well. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah,
Yeah,
I see how these are just all pieces of a puzzle, and they can be put together in different ways depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
absolutely. Absolutely, and there's a lot
Mhm.
of moving parts to it. So, yeah,
Yeah. Do you do
that's why
both
it's important.
nonprofit and for-profit work?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we've. Um, I mean, we don't do nearly as many nonprofits that we do with traditional for-profit businesses, but yeah, we do some foundations. I've got a couple of trusts that we work with as well, and but some nonprofit 501(c)(3)s also. So yeah.
Okay. And so if someone's trying to decide to remain a sole proprietor, become an LLC, how to structure their company,
Mhm.
are the people in the room typically like an attorney and a CPA together with the owners, or who usually plays into that decision so that
Yeah,
you're
and
making the
you
best decision possible?
yeah, you touched on it perfectly. It was, I mean, an attorney is great to make sure that you're doing things correctly from a legal perspective and being covered from a legal perspective and liability side, and then a CPA or a tax professional. It's important to have that input on what's the best tax structure for you as well. So yeah. But
Okay.
it's important to get professional advice. There's a lot of I call it kind of that WebMD type knowledge out there that everyone's a doctor when they go to WebMD. But
Mhm.
it's important to make sure that you're getting the proper advice when you're setting things up as an individual trying to create a business.
Yeah, because it's tax how you're perceived by the public. From my
Hmm.
perspective, it's how you're perceived. It's tax advantages. It's liability protection.
Yes. Yep.
Um, there's a lot of different things to look at, and the size of your company and your long-term goals, and what am I trying to accomplish, and
Hmm.
lots of that.
Yeah. And I would
So what
actually
else?
add in there as well, like a business insurance. That's an important relationship to have early on as well, is making sure that your company is being covered properly from a business insurance perspective. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure, sure. So, what does your company comprise of? Are you working with mostly LLCs, or is it just kind of all over the board?
Um, I would say the majority of the companies that we work with are LLCs, either
Hmm.
taxed as an S corp or taxed as a partnership. And again, it's a little bit, it's definitely a different treatment, and it's not a one size fits all. So I mean, it might be like in real estate, for example. There isn't as much advantage to being taxed as an S corp, so being a traditional LLC works just fine. So
Hmm.
so things like that. But I'd say the vast majority that we work with are LLCs, taxed as an S corp. That's probably the most common, and again, like it's not one size fits all, but it is. Uh, I'd say 90% of the time, it's probably a better situation for the taxpayer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if someone is looking to form an LLC or make this decision,
Hmm.
obviously, I'll put your number up here again. They can call you or email you. You probably have
Absolutely.
attorneys that you work with that you can recommend, or they can bring their own. What is the best time of year to make that decision?
Um, it's a good question. I mean, from a tax perspective, we always like to have a clean cutoff or a clean start. So beginning of
Mhm.
the year, beginning of a quarter, something like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's about running the business and having the protection that you need. And so if it's in the middle of a month, that's okay. To um, we just have to make adjustments as we go through and get things going and get things reported. So
well, you reconcile the taxes at the end of the year,
right,
6 months as sole proprietor, 6 months as LLC or whatever you do.
right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, very good. Yeah, I'm definitely used to hearing, oh, wait till the first of the year. Unless the tax advantage is large enough, it makes sense to do it in the middle of the year.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
So they would just contact you directly. This would be a great time of year if you're trying to go into January 1st with a clean start.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So how's it going during the pandemic, Bryan? Are you busy, or are you working at home? Are you staying safe at home?
Yeah, we definitely have made adjustments with the office throughout this year. We're fortunate enough that um, my business itself, it's been different, but it hasn't been completely affected or impacted by like everybody, like the majority of businesses have these days. So it's been strange because I've never had more business in May than I have in April, which happened this year, which is very odd to me. But this year just stretched things out for us a little bit. It just smoothed it out. We didn't have the traditional tax season, but yeah, my staff, we've kind of got a schedule that we're trying to stick to working from home, and we've put the necessary technology in place to make sure that we can serve clients just as smoothly and effectively as we would if we were here in the office. So yeah,
Yeah. So the tax season being shifted around, the deadlines being shifted, just kind of spread your work out a little bit. Makes
right,
sense.
exactly,
Yeah, and
exactly.
hopefully going into next year, it will be more back to normal. And I know I'm hoping that maybe by February or so.
I think we're all hoping that. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll try to figure it out. And surprisingly, my small business clients, most of them are open. They're just open in a limited way.
Yeah,
So it's not the perception that, oh, everything closed down. Things definitely shifted, and we're trying to be careful around the holidays. But I think more small businesses are open than people realize, and it's so important that we patronize them to support that part of our
absolutely,
economy. Yeah, including
definitely.
Bryan at Osprey CPA Services. So if you need a CPA and you need to get a hold of Bryan, here's the information one more time, and then we'll wrap up. Osprey Accounting Services is ospreycpa.com, 838-6708. So, and Bryan, you office out of Federal Way, but you service kind of Seattle South down to Olympia, or mostly?
Yeah, it's interesting with Federal Way, the whole Federal Way area, especially. I mean, Auburn, Kent. We've got lots of clients in this area, but I started my practice in the South Sound in Gig Harbor, and
Mm-hmm.
so I've kind of got clients from Federal Way down to into Olympia, Lacey,
Yeah.
also up the peninsula a little bit too, up Paulsbo. I think I have a couple clients in Paulsbo as well as Port Orchard and things too. So it's pretty stretched out, and especially in our technology driven, virtual driven approach these days, it makes things easier to serve clients that are not as close by. So
Yeah, it's not location dependent like it used to be, because you can do
right,
business,
exactly.
especially what you do. So,
Yeah,
well, very
I
good.
love meeting clients and face to face, but it's not always possible. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Me too. I can about 90% of my business online, and
Hmm.
yeah, haven't had to do as many, or haven't been able to do as many face to face, but I'm used to that because I work at home and I'm always doing work
Yeah,
online, so it's not unusual. Well, thanks, Bryan. It's
yeah.
good to speak with you about this topic that's of interest to me, and I'm sure other business owners. And hopefully this
Awesome.
will, intrigue some people to ask some questions or contact you to talk about those decisions. So thanks again,
That would be
and
great.
we'll be talking to you
Thank.
again next month in December. We'll have to, if you have a topic that you'd love to hear Bryan address, please put that in the comments or email Bryan or visit his site. Fill out the contact us form and let him know what that might be. So thanks again.
Thank you. All right.
That's all
We'll
right.
see you next time.